Welcome to an extraordinary series of videos about how a hygienist just like you might approach and then deliver a conversation that is vitally important, but often very challenging to have. A conversation you might have with an employer or a manager or coworker or maybe even a patient about issues like compensation or employment status, or maybe even infection control infractions. Tough conversations to have. How do you do it with grace, authenticity, courage, and professionalism, and of course, success? My name is Catherine Eitel-Belt, and I'm the founder and owner of LionSpeak, a communications coaching company that specializes in extraordinary yet unscripted communication skills for the dental and healthcare industries. I'd like to thank the Canadian Dental Hygienists Association for inviting me to participate in this series of videos to share some insights on how hygienists can strengthen their communication skills to advance their career, to support their team and their dentist, and ultimately to be a better service to their clients. Each of the individual videos will explore some very specific situations that are pretty common to what we've heard from hygienists can be challenging for them. It will help you explore those. It will also give you some examples of how you might sound using your own words to accomplish a successful communication around that topic. This video, however, is an introductory video to give you a little instruction on how to utilize two basic communication frameworks. One is around the mindset of a great communicator, and the other is the actual conversation framework itself. So let's take a moment to explore both of those frameworks to set you up for success. As I'm sure you're aware, all great leaders in any community, any profession, or even within a single office setting are also great communicators. That's one of the components of being a great leader. But I'll also submit to you that great communicators often become great leaders because they've mastered the ability to communicate well. We like to say that great professionals and great leaders communicate with two things. One is clarity, and the other is inspiration. We want to help you figure out how you can create your conversations so that your message is clear, and at the end of the day, people are inspired or motivated to take action on the suggestions that you're making. What I want to do in this video is give you three things. One is, what are the tools, what is the framework for creating a great leadership and communication mindset? Because it's from that mindset that the words will flow. So we'll give you a framework on mindset. We'll also give you a skill set, which will be the actual framework for the conversation, and then a couple of tools along the way. Now let me start with a couple of tools right now. One is timing of communications. So sometimes these conversations can happen at the spur of the moment. Maybe someone is just going to walk up to you and say, hey, I want to talk to you about something in the middle of your day. What we've structured our videos around for you are those times when you're bringing the communication to an individual, like we said, to an employer, to a coworker. And because you're bringing it, you do have some control often about the timing. My suggestions about timing would be, if it is at all possible to have your most courageous conversations and challenging conversations in the morning, I would strongly advise you to do that. The main reason is that most of us in the morning are rested, we've had a little bit to eat, and we're getting ready energetically to start a day from a full bucket. We tend to have better conversations, we tend to think more clearly, we tend to have more control over our emotions than we do at the end of a day when we've worked hard, we may have spent some of the energy in that bucket, and we're a little more tired. It's a little more challenging sometimes to keep a handle on our emotions and to communicate in the way we meant to. So if you have a choice, that would be my suggestion. If the morning, for whatever reason, isn't a choice, then and you've decided to do this in the evening, let's say after work, then hedge your bets and give yourself a pause. Uh, Grab a cup of tea, finish your work, grab something to drink, take a walk around the building, get a breath of fresh air, 5-10 minutes. Just maybe even ask the other person that you're trying to communicate with, I'd love to have a conversation with you about something. I was just wondering if we could maybe meet back here in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'd like to just clear my head, get a breath of fresh air, and then come back relaxed and share some thoughts with you. So try to do it in the morning. If not, then try to get yourself a little break between work and the start of this conversation if you can, because timing can really be something you can control and use to your benefit. One other idea around timing is to ask the other party if this is a good time for them. We often don't know what's going on in the background for someone else. You don't know what phone call they just took earlier in the day, what worries they have on their mind. Maybe they are anticipating an evening event with their family or friends. So checking with someone to see if this is the best time or if scheduling a time soon might be more advantageous. So again, if it's an option and it can wait a day or two and you can schedule a time, it's often good to check with someone and make sure that it's a good time for them. There are basically 3 mechanisms we use to create a complete communication. One is our body language, the other is our voice, tone, and volume, and the third is our actual word choice. Now, there's a lot of research to support that the bulk of our message is communicated with our body language, meaning our facial expressions, our smile, our eye contact, our posture, our gestures. The second biggest part of our communication is done with tone, pace, which means the speed at which you're speaking, and our volume. And the least impact is created with the words that we choose. So you've probably had lots of examples in your life of times where the word someone used was congruent with their body language, and so you believed them easily. But if you ever had a chance to communicate with someone that the words that they were using didn't match the body language or the tone, the body language, what's communicated with the body language, will trump the words every time. One of my favorite examples is if you asked a spouse, "What's wrong, honey?" and the answer was, "Nothing." And they cross their arms and they frown their face and their tone goes down. The words say one thing, but the body language and tone says another. And we tend to believe body language because it's harder to make your body lie than it is to make the words untrue. And so we intuitively know that. So how is that useful for you? As I show you these frameworks and as you watch the video, just know that even if you copied my actual words verbatim, but your body language betrayed your actual truth, it will trump the words no matter how slick and how perfect they are. So it really speaks to our first framework that we're going to spend some time on, which is the mindset framework, which is based on what you believe to be true and where you're standing, what emotional platform you're standing on and speaking from. So in a second, we'll explore that. But I just wanted to say that most of your body language is driven and informed by what you believe internally and what your emotions are around this conversation. But there are some things you can control. You can control your eye contact. You can take a breath and slow your breathing down so that you have full breaths to speak from. There's a lot of research to show that as we get more anxious and as we get more worried or frightened or angry, that we tend to take shorter, more frequent, shallow breaths. And that is all a signal to the recipient of our communication that all is not well here. And so if you can give some mindfulness to that and notice what it feels like to take a deep breath, slow down your pace a little. Or if you want to be energetic and passionate, maybe to speed it up, but just notice your tone and how can I steer it and use it to my advantage? Maybe think about unfolding your arms, leaning into a conversation, putting your weight on both feet instead of leaning off to the side, which is a less confident position. Maybe a very centered position rather than an aggressive stance forward or a more insecure stance back. So that weight on both feet, opening your body language to what's possible, softening your facial expression, softening your eyes, softening your smile, breathing so that you calm your tone. All of that will help in terms of the body language and the things that you're communicating through that language to the recipient of the conversation. So consider. And so now let's talk about word choice. I want to mention here that Lions Speak, and myself in particular, are great advocates for the idea of using conversation frameworks versus scripting, word for word scripting. I'm not a fan of scripts, and I'll tell you why. I do have an appreciation for what they brought to the marketplace. When scripts were introduced, you typically back in the 40s and 50s, we began to get telephone scripts, and we began to get, with the onset of technology, we were given scripts to use with customers and use with coworkers. And one thing that gave us was consistency of message. So if you had several people answering the phone, or if we were going to speak to clients or customers or patients one-on-one, having a script and asking people to stick to it gave us consistency so that our clients all heard the same message, no matter which employee they were talking to. But one of the things I find that scripts denies us or takes away from us is authenticity and connectivity. So I always ask, why do I have to give up one for the other? Why can I not find a way to get consistency of brand and consistency of message across all personnel, across all locations, and still within that consistency be able to be authentically who I am and my personality so that I'm believable, and also to be connected to this actual conversation with this actual person in this actual moment? Because there isn't enough paper in the world to script out every possible way that a conversation could go. So instead, from Lions Speak, we'd like to present these frameworks. A framework is a structure that you would memorize. You would memorize the structure and you would stick to the structure. But within the framework, you get to be who you are. Now, in many of the videos you're going to watch, I'm going to give examples. I'll talk about the framework and the approach, and then I'll give an example of how I might sound if I were a hygienist and I were speaking to my employer, or I was speaking to a coworker. And I just want to preface all the videos you're going to hear with the fact that our hope is that you won't feel the need to copy that verbatim, that you will hear in it the framework I'm going to give to you today, and you will hear it interpreted through my own voice and personality. And we fully expect and encourage that you would speak it through your own personality and your own inflection and word choice. The person on the receiving end of that communication knows when they're being read to from a memorized script. They also know when someone's speaking authentically, really well, really organized, and really effectively. So use the frameworks to keep you grounded, to keep you centered, to keep you feeling confident. And then within it, be who you are. If you're funny, be funny. If you're gracious and kind and sweet, then be that. Show up big in that framework. Don't hold back, all right? So that's one thing. Secondly, there's two major frameworks that I want to give you. I alluded to it earlier. One is mindset of a great communicator, and the other is the actual skill set. So let's look at mindset first. There are three things that all great leaders and communicators, I believe, have mastered in terms of getting their mindset strong. before they open their mouth. And the reason that I talk about this first, before I give you the actual conversation framework, is because I believe if you get this piece right, the right words will come and you will communicate the way you meant to communicate. If your mindset is strong, confident, non-judgmental, respectful, and feeling very secure in your own position. And that comes from mindset. So let's explore the three pieces of a really strong mindset. One is all great leaders and communicators take responsibility for the results that they achieve. Now I want to say that again. All great leaders and communicators take full responsibility for the results that they consistently achieve. So if, for example, you are frequently misunderstood, by your definition, people misunderstand your intention, or they misunderstand your communication, or if people say things like, you always seem so angry, and you think to yourself, I don't feel angry, I don't mean to sound angry, but you get that consistent feedback. Great leaders don't hold other people responsible for the outcomes they're achieving. I believe we would live in a completely different world and work in a completely different profession and environment if more people were able to take full responsibility for their results. So why this is important is because if you enter in with any framework, if you enter into a conversation and you aren't taking responsibility for your part in whatever breakdown it is you want to talk about, if you're holding the other person responsible for your success, for your happiness, for your satisfaction, your professional satisfaction, for your results, then you are basically a victim. And from a victim's mentality, it's very hard to have a courageous conversation and have it go well. So I want you to think about, as you think about the conversations and as you look at the scenarios that we present to you in this video series, I want you to think about what part of this would be my responsibility. It's our responsibility to know what our minimum line is in terms of an issue. Let's say it's some sterilization protocols, or maybe it is the compensation that we need to manage our lives appropriately. Whatever the issue is, we must take responsibility for what we need, for what we'll contribute to be of value around that, all of those things. So I remember when I first really took this on as an adult professional woman, I thought, well, I've heard all my life that a strong individual takes responsibility for their actions and for their results. But when I really got it, I remember it felt a little heavy, because I remember thinking, well, but I'm not the one who is doing these things. I'm not the one who says those things. I'm not the one who's denying this raise, or this, is falling short of these protocols that in my opinion are correct. I'm not the one that's doing that. So I'm not going to take responsibility for that. And yet, once I understood it fully, I realized that it wasn't heavy. It was actually freeing. It actually freed me from being anyone's victim and being out of not having control over my own destiny. So when I enter into any courageous conversation, whether it's with my husband, it's with my children, it's with a client, it's with a professional colleague, it's with anyone, I know that I ultimately will make all the decisions that are good for me. I will be held accountable. I will hold myself accountable for what I need to be secure and confident and happy. And so don't step into the framework as a victim. Always know that you don't have to work anywhere. You don't have to be in this career. You could be in another one if you chose so. You don't have to accept anything that you're not prepared to accept. You can make those decisions. You're not the victim of anyone in terms of your decisions. And so that's very empowering. And I hope that it encourages you to go in feeling not aggressive, but confident. So take responsibility for your own decisions. Secondly, if you really want a strong mindset, I want you to get in the habit of challenging what we call your BS. And BS in our world stands for belief system. So we're all guided by a set of beliefs, and great leaders and communicators know that. They know that what they're communicating about and how they're doing that comes from a set of beliefs that we all operate from. The rub is we don't all believe the same things. So for example, we believe certain things are good and certain things are not good. They're bad. We believe certain things are right and other things are wrong. We believe certain things are very possible and certain things are impossible. And you can speak to a number of other people who say, oh, but I do think that's possible, or I don't think that's wrong. I actually think that's right. Or I think that this is bad, not that. And so if you go into the communication understanding two things, I'm operating on a set of current beliefs, and I'm going to challenge my beliefs to see if there's any other way, other more expanded way I could look at it. What I want to suggest to you is every time you challenge a current belief, what do I believe about this other person? What do I believe to be true about them? Do I believe they're capable of change and improvement? Do I believe that they truly care about me and my own level of professional satisfaction? Do I believe they have high integrity? Whatever you believe is true about the other person is going to influence your ability to communicate and what you communicate. And so I want to encourage you that every time you maybe challenge a belief like that, it doesn't mean you'll come up with a new one. But what it does mean is you will poke some holes in those beliefs by asking a series of internal questions that are very empowering. Questions like, is that the only thing I could believe about this person or about this circumstance? Is there any other way that this scenario could go? Even though it's turned out this way numerous times, is that the only way that it could turn out? Is there some resource or some piece of information or some idea that I haven't yet uncovered? Is there something that that other person hasn't shared with me yet that might make me feel differently about my approach? Those are just some of the hundreds of questions you could ask yourself, but all of them are a valuable set of questions that are basically poking holes in the beliefs we're currently holding. And what amazing possibilities that get opened up when you begin to ask questions like that. So when you get in the habit of challenging, first of all, noticing what your beliefs are, and then challenging your current beliefs with that set of powerful questions, you begin to open up some additional opportunities for expanded ideas. And great conversations, courageous conversations that go well, usually tap into a real broad source of expanded possibilities and ideas. So get used to recognizing the belief structures and also challenging those. So number one is to take responsibility for your own decisions and your own outcomes. And number two, to recognize you have some belief systems and challenge that BS. Number three in our list of how to create a really strong mindset to speak from is something we call the flow. And the way I describe the flow is to imagine in your mind that in your life, there's a river of abundance and prosperity. And in this river, this flow, when you're fully in it, life is good. Life is abundant. You're happy with your salary. You're happy with your home. You're happy with your relationships. You're happy with your health. Things are good. In the flow is when life is good. And when you've been in that flow in your life, you probably felt emotions that were something like happiness, satisfied. You felt confident. You felt enthusiastic. You felt inspired. You felt loving, you felt loved, you felt generous, you felt forgiving, um, you felt benevolent and creative and passionate, all the positive emotions, everything from you felt a little tickled to you felt elated, and everything in between, you feel when you're in the flow. Now, I want you to imagine on the side of the flow are some muddy banks. And in the muddy banks is where life is harder. It's where things aren't going. We aren't making the income that we think we deserve or really have worked hard for. We aren't, our relationships at work or at home are not what we wish they were. We aren't happy with our home setting. We aren't happy with our physical fitness or our physical health. Maybe we're, so whatever in life is not going well. In the muddy banks, we're still maybe moving our life forward, but we are sluggish, a little more slow in that progress. In the mud, we have the exact opposite emotions than in the flow. We have worry and confusion. We have sadness. We have anger. We have frustration. We have a lack of confidence, a lack of creativity. All the negative emotions are there. So I want you to consider, as you begin to think about having this conversation with this other person, what platform are you on? Are you in the mud and are you trying to craft this conversation from that emotional standpoint, or are you in the flow? Because we view the flow and mud analogy as an emotional platform from which to do two things: make your most important decisions and have your most important conversations. If you have some mindfulness around checking in with how you're feeling. You noticed I used feelings as a way to determine where you are. So the way you know whether you're in the mud or you're in the flow is by how you feel, not what you think, but how you feel. So before you step into the conversation, just check in. Check in to, are you feeling positive, confident, secure, satisfied? Even if you're not sure the conversation will go exactly the way you want, are you still confident you'll find your way? You'll still be able to find a solution for yourself. That's confidence. That's certainty, and those feelings are definitely in the flow. So the reverse of that is in the mud. You can imagine that if you made a decision from the mud where you feel anxious, you feel worried, you feel confused, you feel threatened, any of those emotions, your decisions would be different from fear or anger than they would be from confidence, from certainty, from security. And so my suggestion to you is, as you're getting your mindset together, accept responsibility for your own decisions and your own outcomes. Your happiness is your responsibility, not your boss, not your coworkers. Your integrity, your results, your reactions are your responsibility. No one else has that control over you, nor should you give it to anyone else. So take responsibility for how you are crafting your life. Also, remember you have some beliefs that are guiding you, and challenge those beliefs with those useful, powerful questions internally to open up some possibilities for yourself. And then check in with how you're feeling before you sit down. Am I in the mud or am I in the flow? From the flow, I will speak differently. From the flow, I will make better decisions for my life. That's how you get on a strong emotional platform. That's how you secure a really strong leadership mindset from which to speak. Now, people have often asked me if I'm in the mud, and that's why I want to have this conversation. how do I get in the flow? How do I move from one to the other? So all I can share with you are some of the ways I move myself when I recognize I'm in the mud into the flow. I'll give you a couple of ideas. You'll have to come up with your own list because it won't work. My list won't work for everyone, but here's some of the things that have been helpful for me. I know for sure that I have found, and it took me a while to find, a set of guided meditations that when I'm really feeling stuck in the mud, I can put those on, I can listen to those, I feel much more grounded, I feel myself moving into the flow of abundance, of prosperity, of control, of my own power. And that's very helpful. Now, for you, it might be prayer. For you, it might just be sitting and breathing and being still with yourself or with someone that you love. It certainly is an individual thing, but finding that tool is really helpful. Another thing for me has been exercise. And I don't mean go and work out for 2 hours at the gym necessarily. Sometimes don't have that kind of time. But I have found a brisk walk, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, to clear my head, to recognize I'm in the mud, get myself over into the flow. Generally, if I can be out in nature, I can get some brisk walk. I clear my head. I feel myself moving from the mud to the flow. And then when I come back and I speak, it's usually much better. Another one that I have, I'm a big music lover, so I have a playlist on my iPod that I literally call the Flow playlist. And I'm very particular about the music, the lyrics, the melodies that get into that playlist. But if I combine a brisk walk, meditation, guided meditation, and some music from the Flow playlist all together, I guarantee you I will move from the mud to the flow and I will make better decisions. So I try not to make important decisions until I've done that, if I can. Another helpful tip is there are some passages that I have collected, quotes and passages and pieces of inspiration that I've put into a file on my computer that I call my mantra manual. And in my mantra manual or my flow manual, I can go there and read those passages and I can read those pieces of inspiration, and they also tend to center me and bring me back to that flow. And lastly, I would say one of the most important things is I have developed an inner circle of friends and a few family members that understand this concept. And they understand what the flow represents, that connection to my strongest self and that inner voice of guidance. And so sometimes I reach out to them, a conversation with them. You have to be very careful because it has to be someone who really understands this concept. And it took me a long time to just get a handful of people that I could count on to help move me from the mud into the flow. But we have almost an internal language around it, and it's been very helpful. So hopefully those are some helpful tips. I'll give you one other idea. It's a little acronym that is very helpful to getting me into the right mindset, and it's called GECKO. And GECKO stands for gift, expect, choice, and open. When I think of the little gecko on my shoulder and I think of the G, the gift, I think to myself, this conversation I'm getting ready to have is a gift to me. It's also a gift to them, and I'll explain why. It's a gift to me because even though I was initially feeling angry or I was feeling very frustrated, or I was feeling frightened or whatever the emotion was that had me in the mud, if I say to myself, remember gecko, remember this is a gift. The gift to you is a chance to practice these frameworks. It's a chance to practice and demonstrate to other people that there is a better way of communicating than anger and raised voices and calling names and storming out of rooms. There's a better way, and I want to be the embodiment of that better way. I want to show that we can disagree and still be respectful, that we can champion what we need and maybe what others need, and not judge other people if they don't fall in line with what we believe. So I want to give that gift, and I want to recognize that this challenging conversation is a gift to me because I get to, yet again, I get to practice being that voice in the world and that voice in my profession. So it's a gift to me and to them, and I think to the world. The E stands for the fact that I remind myself I expect it to go well. Even though it maybe hasn't gone well in the past, this is a new day. I have a new set of skills. I have a new intention, and I'm fully in this flow. And so I expect it to go well, even if the other person doesn't. The C stands for reminding myself that I'm nobody's victim, that I'm always at choice, what we call at choice. And so is the other person, even if they don't know it. So I remind myself that they don't have to keep me employed. They don't have to agree to my solutions. They don't have to do anything that doesn't feel right or good for them, nor do I. So I'm going to go in with the full intention of reaching a great resolution, but I'm always going to remember that I'm always in control of my own destiny and I'm always at choice. And that's very freeing. And then the O is a reminder to me to be open. I often have ideas about that I want to present about the way I think it should be or the way I think it should go. But I remind myself that what I really want is a resolution that feels good to both parties. That's what I really want. I don't need to be right. And this is really important. Humans have a great desire to be right and to win. And it gets in our way a lot of times. And this O in Gecko really helps us to set aside our need to have our solution be the winner, and to say, I do have an idea, or I have a couple of ideas that I'd like to present, but I'm not married to my idea. I'm married to it being the launching pad to explore whatever ideas the two of us could come up with that would be beneficial to both of us and feel comfortable to both of us. So remain open to, I've seen people come up with the most remarkable ideas that shocked both parties when they were open to exploring creative solutions. All right, so that's Gecko. I hope that helps you to get into that flow, move from the mud to the flow, and get on that strong, powerful mindset before you speak. All right, so this brings us to this final framework, and this framework is about the conversation. It is the simplest and yet most profound and powerful framework I've ever used for having a courageous conversation. The acronym for this framework is called ARCH, and it's a beautiful acronym because I do think it's a bridge between where we have disagreement or potential disagreement to agreement, to no resolution to a resolution. It's a bridge, it's an arch. So that'll help you remember it. I want to suggest that there are two things to do prior to using ARCH. One is you're going to want to set you got to imagine you're in the right mindset, but they don't know anything about it. They probably didn't watch this video. They don't know anything about Gecko. They don't know anything about a strong mindset. So be patient. You're standing in a great, on a strong emotional platform coming from a great mindset. You're getting ready to use ARCH as your framework. And as you step into that, I just want you to do two things. I want you to set the context with the other person for this conversation. And then I want you to check in with them about how they're feeling about the issue before you start to use your ARCH framework. Let me give you an example of what that might sound like. So if I were going to sit down with an employer and let's say talk about infection control protocols that I'm not feeling we're following very well, and I have some concerns about it. Let's just say that's my issue. And I would probably set the context by saying, thanks so much for giving me a few minutes of your time. I wanted to talk to you about some thoughts I have around our infection control protocols and how we're meeting those. And I have some ideas that I wanted to talk with you about and some thoughts around it, but I'm curious though, just to get us started, how are you feeling about it? What are your thoughts around how we're doing with our infection control protocols and how we're adhering to those? what that's going to do for me is it's going to say, this is the context for the conversation. But before I jump into what I want you to hear from me and my requests and my ideas and my thoughts, I want to check in first to see where you are. This is where you listen. And you're not taking a pause to formulate what you're going to say next. You are really going to listen. Remember, we're not going to be married to being right. We're going to be married to finding a resolution and exploring. And so we need to know where they are. And if you will do this, you will unearth the most useful information. So for example, if my employer or manager, whoever I'm having this conversation with, said, I figured that's what you wanted to talk to me about. And to tell you the truth, I'm really glad you brought this up. And I just want to applaud you for carving out the time to do this. I got to tell you, I'm really worried about it too. I know we're not meeting our infection control protocols the way we should be. I have great concerns about it. I have concerns about the cost of it. I have concerns about the time that it takes. I have concerns about the level of education we've all had around. So you can see that if that is what I hear from my dentist, then my response may be very different than if the response from my dentist was, I don't know what you're talking about. I think we do just fine. I think everything we need to do, we're doing. Anything more, and I think it's actually really unnecessary. Okay, those are two polar opposite ends of the spectrum, and they will guide me on how to then step into Arch from my perspective and lead this conversation. I can do well in either scenario. I just need to know how close or how far are we from where I want to take this conversation. I'm just looking, are we closer than I thought? Are we farther away than I thought? Are we just about where I thought? It will be very helpful. So don't skip this step. Set the context and check in with them. How are they feeling about how this is all going? Or what is their feeling about this issue in terms of where we are? Just get a sense of that before you step forward. It will be invaluable. All right, so now you're ready. Now you've heard their point of view. Try to listen to that non-defensively. Try to be careful and cognizant of your body language as you're listening. Shift into neutral and just listen. Just listen. It's just information. Even if you disagree with it, we still have this whole framework to go. So we're just trying to see, where are they? So the A in ARCH stands for two things. It stands for affirm and acknowledge and find agreement. So how it might sound to do that in this scenario, in this example, would be, so we've just heard the doctor's perspective, and I might say, so, doctor, thank you so much for sharing it. It's helpful to me to understand where you're coming from, and so I appreciate you being so honest about that and what your concerns are. One of the things I most appreciate about working for you is the high quality that you demand in terms of from yourself and from others around how we deliver our clinical care to patients. And I'm wondering would it be safe to say that if we want to improve or increase our sterilization and infection control protocols, we need to find a way to do it so that it's also affordable for the practice to deliver at that level. Safe to say you want to, as long as we can find a way to make it affordable and still be profitable, delivering care at that level with the highest level of infection control protocols. Would that be a fair goal? So in other words, what I'm trying to do is acknowledge what I love about them, acknowledge and be grateful for their honesty and their perspective, and then to find a place where we agree. We agree that we've got to find a way to make this affordable, and we need the standard to be high. And remember, we're not talking about creating a protocol, communications protocol for people that aren't reasonable. If someone is not emotionally healthy, no protocol is going to help you. But assuming that the person you're talking to is a relatively emotionally healthy person and is a reasonable person is going to say, well, of course I agree to that. Now we get to move to the R in ARCH, which is resolution or making a request from your perspective. So here you would say, well, great. that I'd like to make a request. I'd like to request that we lay out whatever your idea is, maybe your idea is that we lay out the guidelines from our, governing body, and we tap into the resources that our entire team has for sourcing those materials or for finding the most efficient way to deliver at that level so that we can make this profitable. Maybe we could also take a look at some of the other efficiencies in the practice to be able to impact that positively for you. Whatever your ideas are. And I would suggest right here that if you don't have an idea about how to solve it, and they don't have an idea about how to solve it, that might be the time that you request to bring in a third party. Maybe there is a coach, maybe there is a course, maybe there is another colleague that has mastered this somehow or come up with some great solutions and solved this issue. So whatever those outside resources are, it's either going to be your idea, their idea, a combination of those, or you're going to bring in an outside source for some resources and new ideas. So whatever that is, the R stands for, that's the negotiation piece. That's the place that you try to get to an idea that will create a resolution for this conflict or for this disagreement. So that's where you do that. Now, one caution I want to give you, and you'll notice in the videos that you watch, we don't connect the A and the R with the word but. We connect the A and the R statements with and. So listen to the difference. I just wanted to say thank you for just being so honest, and it's really helpful to understand your perspective. And would it be fair to say that we both want to find a way to make this both affordable and meet the safety standards that we need for our patients and for our team? Would that be fair? And if they say, well, of course, then to say, okay, but to do that, we're going to need to do X, Y, and Z. It's much better to say, and to do that, I have some ideas. So connect either affirming and agreement with and, or the entire A to the R with and. Try to eliminate the word but. There certainly are times where the word but is the right choice, but rarely in conflict. In conflict, usually and will be a better choice. All right, so let's assume now you've gotten to the resolution. Somebody's idea has made some progress, and now most people would stop. Most people would say, oh my gosh, we got an idea to work with, we've got a resolution, we've got a solution, and look at us, we found it. And they would be done. And they would walk away almost always without clarity around next steps. So if I could in this video get down on my knees and beg you, I would beg you to continue to complete ARCH, and the C in ARCH stands for confirming or reconfirming what the agreement is, who's going to do what, and by when specifically. So be sure you repeat and share the repeating of what did we agree to. So sometimes I'll say, sometimes I thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I'm excited about what we've decided. I think it's going to work great. Often I think that I think I've been clearer than I actually have been in conversations. And so just to make sure that we're both on the same page, could we just review what we agreed and who's going to do what and by when? And then just review it, because it's so helpful, and you'll see how many times you would have gotten it wrong. And then the H is the really easy part. You're just going to put a bow on this whole conversation. I'm going to leave the conversation with hope. And what I mean by that is really two things: gratitude and optimism. So it might sound like, doctor, I just wanted to say that I'm so grateful that you were willing to have this conversation with me, stick in here, even though it was kind of a tough conversation to have, we did it. And I'm really appreciative of that. And I also am really optimistic about the idea that we came up with. I think it's certainly worth a try. I think, I feel even optimistic that even if it doesn't work, that based on the conversation we've just had, we'll come back and we'll talk about some new ideas. So thank you. I'm so appreciative. So it's this piece of gratitude. It's also some optimism for the future of the solution that you have negotiated. So that's it in a nutshell. Make sure you think about body language and timing. Make sure that you get yourself in the right mindset. You take responsibility for your own choices and your own decisions and your own outcomes. That you check in on those beliefs and you poke some holes in them to open up some space for new ideas. Make sure that you're in the flow before you speak and before you step up and say, could we have a conversation? From the flow, it will be very different and much more empowered. And when you do, set the context and then listen. Ask them, how are you feeling about this? This is what I want to talk about. How are you? Where are you with it? Check in, really listen. Be very, make sure your body language is non-defensive, welcoming to their ideas. Even if you disagree with them, this is just a chance to hear and understand. And then start with Arch. Arch is affirm them, acknowledge them in some way, and then find some agreement, connect those with and, move into resolution, bring some ideas, ask for ideas, bring in some other resources, whatever you have to do to find a new resolution. Then when you've got it, reconfirm the details and leave it wrapped up in a bow of hope, gratitude, optimism. If you do this, you will become known in your office, in your family, with your friends and colleagues, in your association, in your industry, and in the world as a very effective communicator and a dynamic, amazing leader. And who doesn't want to have that kind of impact on the world? So I'd like to leave you with a few final thoughts. First of all, most of us did not learn how to do this well in school or at home when we grew up. Some exceptions maybe, but most of us did not. So what that means is we're learning it now. We're learning it now as dental professionals. So you are right on track. You will shine as a leader when you master these skills. And if you want to have great impact, positive impact on your community, on your family, on your industry, on your practice, in your association, in your neighborhood, then mastering the mindset of a leader and the conversations of a leader are essential. And you have the ability to learn that now. So you're right on track. You're right where you should be. See these as a gift and a chance to practice your skills to do this better and better. Enjoy these videos. I hope you find them helpful, and I hope they give you the courage to have amazing, courageous conversations.